Okay, good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all this morning, kind of in the virtual world. Hope you had a nice weekend. If you can hear me okay, please type yes into the chat window. Okay, great. Thank you so much. Okay, gang. Well, before we get into new content, let me just mention a few things. At this point, I noticed that several of you have registered for a free account on the ClassMarker website. I want to encourage the rest of you to do that as soon as possible. Please register for the ClassMarker website and take the practice quiz online. It'll be important that you do that before you have to use it for your real exam for lab coming up a week from today. So if you don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to ClassMarker, please reread your emails from last week, because I provided information in my emails from last week about an online testing website called classmarker.com. Do you have any questions at this time about the ClassMarker website or about the online testing?
Are we allowed to take it on Wednesday, or we all take it on Monday?
Kim, I want you to all take it on Monday. Are we going to have a practice test for the lab? Yes, but only during the office hours, either today or Wednesday, not during lecture. Anything else? Okay, gang. All right. Well, I hope you're doing well. I hope your families are still well and safe. We can see from the news reports that the coronavirus has definitely invaded Lancaster County, and it's definitely in our communities at this time. So remember to use good common sense when going out. All right, so what we're going to do today is finish up a few notes from chapter 6 and then start chapter 9 on some topics about the joints. Okay, so I'm going to go to a Microsoft Word document at this time and refresh your memory of what we were talking about last class. Okay, so online at this time, you should see, let me try to bring up the chat window so I can see if you folks have questions during our time together here. All right. Okay. So you recall from last time we were talking in chapter 6, and we were talking about how vitamin D is manufactured, with an idea of understanding that vitamin D is important for calcium absorption. And then we're also going to go into a description of how calcium homeostasis is maintained in the body. So from last time, this is a repeat that you see on your screen right now from the Word document. We know that the production of biologically active vitamin D starts in the skin. It starts in the skin. It does not finish in the skin. Okay? Within your skin cells, you have a special chemical called 7-dehydrocholesterol that is initially present in an inactive state. When sunlight strikes the skin, that chemical is photoactivated. It basically turns on. And when that substance is turned on, it moves into the bloodstream. From here, the photoactivated 7-dehydrocholesterol is delivered to the liver. Cells in the liver take that molecule and manufacture a new substance out of it. Don't worry about the name of the new substance. I could give it to you, but it's not really that important for you at this time. This new substance is made in the liver, is then placed back into the bloodstream and delivered to the kidneys. Once that new material is in the kidneys take that new material and modify it into biologically active vitamin D, which is called calcitriol. The calcitriol that is made in the kidneys is then dumped back into the bloodstream, and it's delivered to the small intestine, which is the location that you absorb calcium and all the other nutrients of the food and drink that you consume. Okay. Do you have any questions about that flow chart or about those notes before we continue? Okay, not seeing any questions on the chat window. I will keep going. Okay, so number 2 here. Okay, so at this point, we're going to assume that calcium has been absorbed in the small intestine because vitamin D, the biologically active form of vitamin D, was successfully synthesized in the kidney and delivered to the small intestine so that calcium could be absorbed from the food. Okay, so at this point, remember that calcium homeostasis in the body is monitored, it's measured and monitored and regulated in the bloodstream. Okay. Okay. If, as we've said before, if there is too much calcium in the bloodstream, you're going to end up depositing that excess calcium into the extracellular matrix of bone. Okay. So very important for you is that word deposit. And the idea is that you put extra material into the bone. Okay. If there's too little calcium in the bloodstream, for whatever reason, you haven't been consuming enough from your diet, or there actually is an absorption problem in the small intestine, then what the body will try to do is elevate or raise the blood calcium level by pulling calcium out of the bone. What is the fancy word that we use in anatomy and physiology that refers to removing calcium from the bone? If you know that, the answer to that question, please type it into the chat window. What's the fancy word for removing calcium from bone? Please type that into the chat window. Once again, what is the fancy word for removing calcium from the bone? What is that? Anyone know? I'll type the question into the chat window. What is the technical word for removing calcium from bone? Okay, seem to have stumped. Yes, okay, Ashley, very good. Brendan, good, good. It is in fact resorption. That's correct. Okay, good job. All right, let's put that down in your notes, okay? If there is too little calcium in the bloodstream, your body will remove calcium from the extracellular matrix of bone using a process called resorption. Okay, so let me underline that. Okay, very good, folks. So at this point, we are giving you an overview of what happens, but what I want to do is go into a little bit of detail about figure 610 here. So let me take the statement of number 2 here. Let me take this statement and go into a little bit more detail for you. Okay, so number 3, when calcium is too low in the bloodstream, here's what happens. Okay, when calcium's too low in the bloodstream, the parathyroid gland, okay, the parathyroid gland, you can see basically where they're loaded on, where they're positioned on the posterior surface of your thyroid gland in your neck region. That's shown to you in figure 610, page 189, okay. The parathyroid glands will release parathyroid hormone. That's when the calcium's too low in the bloodstream. And the parathyroid hormone will cause 2 different things to happen. First, the parathyroid hormone will stimulate osteoclasts to increase calcium resorption from the bone matrix. Excuse me. So the parathyroid hormone will stimulate osteoclasts to increase calcium resorption from the bone matrix. This occurs when the calcium in the blood is too low. And at the same time, it will stimulate kidneys to do 2 different things. Okay. The parathyroid hormone will stimulate the kidneys to secrete less calcium in the urine, right? If there's too much calcium in the body will try to store the excess in the extracellular matrix of the bone, but some of the calcium will actually be removed from the body in your urine. You will literally pee it out of the body. But in this case, if the calcium is too low, the parathyroid hormone communicates to the kidneys, which are responsible for forming the urine, to actually secrete less calcium in the urine. Okay, what that means effectively is, i.e., more calcium stays in the blood. Okay, so when calcium's too low, the parathyroid hormone tells the kidneys to stop releasing calcium in the urine. At the same time, okay, remember that the kidneys are themselves responsible for manufacturing biologically active vitamin D. In the chat window, here's a question for you. Coming up. Okay, here's a question. What is the name for biologically active vitamin D? What do you think, folks? Biologically active vitamin D, what's its name? Okay, Kimberly. All right, I'm seeing some different things here. The best name, because there's a lot of confusion out there, and there are alternative forms. The best name for biologically active vitamin D is calcitriol. Okay, calcitriol. All right. So at any rate, let's get back to our notes here. the parathyroid hormone will stimulate the kidneys to increase production of calcitriol. Manufacture more calcitriol, which in turn will stimulate more calcium absorption in the small intestine. Okay. All right, so let me summarize that, because I know this is going fairly quickly and there's a lot of sort of new fancy words that can be confusing. When calcium is too low in the bloodstream, the parathyroid glands in your neck will release parathyroid hormone. That will stimulate the osteoclasts to increase calcium resorption from the bone matrix. That means we pull calcium out of the bone, put it into the bloodstream. While this is occurring, the parathyroid hormone will also stimulate the kidneys to secrete less calcium in the urine and stimulate the production of more calcitriol. Okay, let's take a look at the other side of the coin. What if calcium is too high in the blood? What happens then? Okay, so number 4. When calcium is too high in the bloodstream, how does the body handle that? Well, in this scenario, what will happen is that the thyroid gland, okay, the thyroid gland, not the parathyroid gland. So be careful you appreciate the difference. The thyroid gland will produce calcitonin, okay, calcitonin, not calcitriol. Be careful you don't confuse those two words that start with the letter C, right? At this time, we got all these C words going around. We've got calcitriol, calcitonin, calcium. Be careful with these C words. So the thyroid gland produces calcitonin, which stimulates osteocytes to deposit extra calcium from the bloodstream into the extracellular matrix of the bone tissue. Okay. All right, gang. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but do you have any questions at this time? Okay, not hearing any questions from you, so I'll assume that you're okay. And so at this time, I'm going to let that be my wrap up for chapter 6, because we need to move on to chapter 9 at this point. Okay, so one more time, call for questions from chapter 6. Anything on your mind? Okay.
Where is the parathyroid gland at?
Okay, all right, yes. The parathyroid gland is on the back surface of your thyroid. So if you look on page 189 in figure 610 there, you can see where the thyroid gland is in your neck region. Okay, that would be the pinkish tissue there. And the parathyroid glands in that picture are the little nuggets that are colored green. Any other questions? Okay, gang. So keep in mind that this coming Wednesday, we will be 2 weeks away from our next lecture exam. So you can expect me to talk to you a little bit about your lecture exam on Wednesday and what to expect moving forward. But I will foreshadow that now and tell you that your understanding of vitamin D production and your understanding of how blood calcium homeostasis is regulated will be important for you. Okay.
Are you going to give us an outline for that test?
Okay, please repeat that.
Are Are you going to give us an outline for the lecture test?
Yes, I will.
Also, can you say when the lecture test is again? My headphone was cutting out.
Sure, 1 second. Exam 2 on your revised syllabus is scheduled from 2 weeks from this Wednesday, which will be April 15th.
Thank you.
Okay, any other?
Dr. Allen, I have a question. Are we having a lab exam today, or is that like next week?
That is next week.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
So for those that attend lab this week, I'll be giving you, as I always do, I will be giving you answers to homework. I will be giving answers to the histology packet, if you've had a chance to work on some of that over the past 7 days. And we'll be getting you ready for your lab exam next week. Anything else? Okay, gang. All right, let's switch gears to chapter 9. Chapter 9 is about the joints of the body. Okay, so chapter 9 begins on page 260 of your textbook. Okay. Chapter 9, joints. Before we get into the nitty-gritty details, let me highlight for you what you are not responsible for, okay? Chapter 9, if you've started reading chapter 9, if you've been working ahead at anything, you appreciate that it does cover some fairly deep anatomy of important joints in the body. So if you do have your textbook in front of you, I hope you do, let's walk through this together. If you turn to page 277, if you turn to page 277, you notice that your textbook talks about the temporomandibular joint. That was a joint that you had to know for your skeleton exam in lab several weeks ago. You simply had to know where the joint was. You didn't have to know the deep structures of the joint. You didn't have to know any ligaments or any things like that. Okay, I am not going to hold you responsible for the anatomy of these joints for the lecture exam. Okay, so, you know, on page 276, you see table 9.4. It's a table of selective joints of the appendicular skeleton. Folks, I am not going to be asking you about the anatomy of these joints. So while I would want you to maybe read through this text one time to have seen it, I am not going to be asking you about the lateral ligament of the temporomandibular joint. That's not going to happen. Same way on page 278, you see the shoulder joint. Okay. If you look carefully at the picture of the shoulder joint, it talks about the glenohumeral ligament. I'm not going to ask you about that on your lecture exam. On page 281, you see the elbow joint. On the elbow joint, the figure 913, you see things like the annular ligament of the radius. I am not going to ask you that. On page 283, you have the hip joint, and you see things like the iliofemoral ligament. Again, I'm not going to ask you about that. On page 285, you see the knee joint. The knee joint, you know, you see things like the transverse ligament of the knee and things like that. I am not going to ask you about that. So the take-home message for you right now, in chapter 9, I'm not going to test you on a bunch of new joint anatomy, okay? So please be advised. I'll put this down here at the start of her notes, be advised that you will not be tested on new joint anatomy. You will not be tested on new joint anatomy. What you will be tested on is a basic vocabulary understanding of what joints are, the types of joints, and joint motion. Okay. You will be tested on joint vocabulary, the types of joints, and joint motions. Those are the things. Okay, Renee, I see your question there. Okay, one moment, please. Okay, folks, can you see my notes on the screen okay? Is that better, Renee? Folks, if you can see my notes on the screen, if you can see them comfortably, please type in yes into the chat window for me. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so yes, you will not be tested on new joint anatomy, but you will be tested on the types of joints, some basic joint vocabulary terms, and the different types of joint motions that are shared with you in Chapter 9. You'll notice from your syllabus that I only have one lecture scheduled for Chapter 9, and that's because we're not going to spend a lot of time on this stuff, and you are not responsible for new joint anatomy. So if there's things I want you to know, I will point it out in your notes. I will give you hints about it in your study guide and things going forward. Okay. So let's begin here. All right, let me start down with some basic terminology, some basic definitions I would want you to be aware of. Number one, the phrase joint. Okay, joint is more properly referred to as an articulation or an arthrosis. Joint means the same thing as articulation and arthrosis. Think about the term arthritis, right? Arthritis, inflammation of an arthrosis, inflammation of an articulation, inflammation of a joint. Okay. Number two, the phrase joint. Joints refer to points of contact between two bones, between bone and cartilage, or sometimes between bone and teeth. Joint refers to points of contact between two bones, between bone and cartilage, or between bone and teeth. And I'll be pointing out some of these things over the next half hour with you. Number three, arthrology, okay? Arthrology is the study of joints. Number four, kinesiology. Kinesiology, you probably have heard of before because people can go get a degree in kinesiology. Kinesiology is study of motion of the human body. Okay. So that gets us started with some basic terminology for Chapter 9. At this point, what I want to define for you are the types of joints that exist. Okay, so joints, if you've read any of Chapter 9 at this point, and certainly some of this should clear out some memory, some cobwebs in your memory when we were doing bones in the lab, you know, just last month. So some of your homework would have touched on some of these points. So not all of it should be completely new and foreign to you. When you're talking about joints, we can classify joints in two different ways, either structurally or functionally. Okay, joints can be classified structurally or functionally. Okay. So let's, excuse me, let's talk about what I want to do, excuse me, is give you sort of a kind of roughly sketched table here where we compare and contrast these terms. So let me do it this way. And let me see here. Let's see if I can make this work. Okay, I'm going to put a table in here. And what I'm going to put down on the left column is structural classification. And on the right column, I will put functional classification. Okay. And then what we will do from the left side of the table to the right side of the table is simply put in the analogous terms. Okay. So from a structural classification, we have fibrous joints. Okay, fibrous joints. And down below, I will give you some notes on what that means in just a moment. But a fibrous joint is a structural classification term. A fibrous joint from a fibrous joint is a structural classification term. From a functional classification perspective, a fibrous joint is the same thing as a synarthrosis. Okay, so a fibrous joint and synarthrosis refer to the same joint, but from two different classification perspectives. Continuing, on the structural classification side, we have cartilaginous joints. Cartilaginous joints, from a functional classification perspective, a cartilaginous joint would be called an amphiarthrosis. Okay, so a cartilaginous joint and an amphiarthrosis is referring to the same joint, but one of them is a structural classification term and the other is a functional classification term. And then we finish this list with the last structural classification category, which are synovial joints. And the comparable functional classification term for a synovial joint is a diarthrosis. Okay, so that's just a little table getting you to see the relationship between these terms. Okay, if I talk about a synarthrosis, that's the same thing as a fibrous joint. If I talk about a cartilaginous joint, that's the same thing as the amphiarthrosis. And similarly, if I talk about a diarthrosis, that's the same thing as a synovial joint. Okay. So let me give you a quick definition of the functional classification terms, and then I'm going to go into some more detail about the structural classification terms. Okay, so functional classification definitions. We have synarthrosis. A synarthrosis refers to an immovable joint, an immovable joint. Okay, and so let me see here. Okay, notice that a synarthrosis is the same thing as a fibrous joint. And so you can see examples of a synarthrosis on figure 9.1, page 262. Figure 9.1, page 262. Take a look at your sutures there of the skull, such as the coronal suture. Okay, a coronal suture is both a fibrous joint and a synarthrosis. It's the same thing. Okay. I don't know if many of you remember, but on your first lab exam, I did have a question about the temporomandibular joint. Excuse me, no. I did have a question about one of the sutures of the skull, and many of you put down temporomandibular joint as its identification. And I think that was probably because at that moment in time in the course, you did not appreciate that a suture is in fact a type of joint. So that's often a sticking point for students. So hopefully this chapter will clear up those sorts of confusion points for you. Okay, number 2, an amphiarthrosis. Okay, an amphiarthrosis is a slightly movable joint. And as you can see from our table above, an amphiarthrosis is the same thing as a cartilaginous joint. So take a look at figure 9.2 on page 263, and you can see the cartilaginous joint of your pelvic girdle there, where you see the pubic symphysis, right? The pubic symphysis is that piece of cartilage there. Okay, the pubic symphysis is an example of an amphiarthrosis. And then finally, we have a diarthrosis, which refers to a freely movable joint. Okay, and so think about the head of your femur as it rests in the acetabulum of the os coxa. Okay, I mean, you can rotate your leg 360 degrees. You can rotate your arm in the shoulder socket 360 degrees. These would in fact be examples of diarthroses. Okay, and so you don't have to turn to it if you don't have it conveniently available. But as an example, the shoulder joint on page 278 would be an example of a diarthrosis. Okay. All right, so the functional classification definitions are pretty straightforward. I hope you can see how the sutures of your skull are by and large not intended to move around very much at all. They're pretty much rigid and locked into place. Okay, so a synarthrosis is an immovable joint. An amphiarthrosis would be a slightly movable joint so that you have a little bit of flexibility. Think about the fibrocartilaginous disc in your vertebral column, right? Those would be amphiarthroses because they do allow for a little bit of movement between the bones of the vertebrae. Okay, and then the diarthrosis, well, example again is the shoulder joint and the hip joint. Do you have any questions right now? Okay. Gang, what I'm going to do next is continue on with the same material, but now I'm going to talk about it from the structural classification perspective and give you a little bit more detail about structural classification terminology. Okay. structural classification details. Number one, all right, let's talk more about fibrous joints. Okay, a fibrous joint is a term used as a structural classification. Well, what exactly do we mean by a fibrous joint? What we mean by that is that fibrous joints have no synovial cavity. Okay, they have no synovial cavity, and the bones that articulate with each other are held together by dense, irregular connective tissue. Okay, so fibrous joints have no synovial cavity. Okay, so let's see here. You might say to yourself, well, okay, but what's a synovial cavity? So let me show you what a synovial cavity kind of can look like. If you look in figure 9.3 on page 264, you see an example in your fingers of figure 9.3 of what a synovial cavity is. Okay, fibrous joints don't have that. Fibrous joints do not have that. So the picture you see in figure 9.3, fibrous joints do not have the synovial cavity. Okay.
Dr. Allen, the synovial cavity, if I'm not mistaken, so I'm looking at the right thing, that's in your patella, correct?
In your patella?
Am I looking at the kneecap right now?
No, you should be looking at, okay, so tell me what page you're on.
264.
Okay, on page 264 in my edition of the textbook, I'm looking at a picture of the finger. Finger 9.3 is a structure of a synovial joint.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm mistaken, dude. Thank you.
Okay, gang. So you may have read about synovial cavities in your personal study time. Synovial cavities have synovial fluid. We're going to be talking about that in just like 5 minutes. But right now I'm pointing out that fibrous joints like the sutures of your skull do not have a synovial cavity. They do not. Okay. Now, when we talk about fibrous joints in even more detail, there are different kinds of fibrous joints. Okay, there are the sutures. Okay, so let's take a look at, in your notes, I'll put in that you should be looking at figure 9.1 at this time. Figure 9.1 on page 262. Okay. Because page 262 will show you the different types of fibrous joints. So we have sutures, right? So I've been highlighting that. So a suture is a fibrous joint found only between the bones of the skull. Fibrous joint found only between the bones of the skull. An example would be the coronal suture. Some sutures in the body, particularly as you get older, as you go from your teen years into your adult years, and as we get into our 40s, 50s, and 60s, some of the sutures of the skull will completely ossify. They'll completely turn into bone tissue. And when that happens, you have what's referred to as a bony joint, which is called a synostosis. I'll put that into your notes. Okay. As you age, meaning the adult years, as you age, some of the sutures will completely ossify. They will completely turn into bone tissue. Okay. Joints that do this are called bony joints, or more properly, synostosis. Synostosis is singular. Synostoses is plural. All right, so a suture is a type of fibrous joint. Continuing. In addition to sutures, you can see for yourself that we also have syndesmoses. That would be picture C of figure 9.1. Syndesmoses are fibrous joints that have a greater distance between the articulating bones than a suture. So there's a little bit of space in between the bones that are articulating. Characterized by more space between articulating bones and has more dense irregular connective tissue than a suture. So examples here in your book would include the anterior tibiofibular ligament, which connects to tibia and fibula, as well as a special syndesmosis that's found in your jaw called a gomphosis. Okay, and example, the anterior tibiofibular ligament between the tibia and fibula. An second example would be a gomphosis, which is a syndesmosis found between the roots of your teeth and their sockets, which you remember from your time with the bones for lab exam 1 are called alveoli. Okay, so there's some words here, obviously, that you do want to pay attention to, right? You want to know what a suture is. You do want to know what a syndesmosis is. You should be familiar with synostosis. You should be familiar with gomphosis. All right. Okay. And then to complete this topic, we're talking about types of fibrous joints. To complete this topic, we have the third type of fibrous joint, which are the interosseous membranes. Okay, the interosseous membranes. Let me write that down. That would be letter C. Come on, word processor. All right. So on picture D there of page 262, you can clearly see that large flat band of tissue between the length of the fibula and tibia. Notice the interosseous membrane picture D of figure 9.1. Okay, gang. Questions so far? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat window. By all means, go ahead and type things in if you have questions. So,
For the-
okay, go ahead.
For the how do you how do you say that?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Genophosis,
Gomphosis.
godphosis. So is it just like what's in between our gums, like where our teeth are at, or?
Yes, basically that is correct. So where your teeth fits into the bone of your jaw, it's in that specific crevice. Anything else?
I know you have to maintain a certain speed. I can't keep up with the notes and what topic we're going to next.
Okay. Okay. Do you need me to back up so you can see?
Yeah, can you just explain it one more time? Because I'm a little confused right now.
Okay. Let me come back here. Okay. So on the screen, we're talking about different kinds of structural classification details. Okay. Remember, for structural classification, we have fibrous joints, cartilaginous joints, and synovial joints. Right now, I'm talking to you about fibrous joints that do not have a synovial cavity. Within fibrous joints, there are subtypes of fibrous joints. The three major subtypes are the sutures of picture A on figure 9.1, the syndemoses of picture C on figure 9.1, and the interosseous membranes of picture D of page 9.1.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Is everybody okay for me to continue? Or are you still writing notes? Okay, I'll try to slow my pace a little bit so it's a little bit easier for you to stay up with your notes. Okay, so we've covered some basic ideas of fibrous joints. Now let's go to the second category of structural classification, which are the cartilaginous joints. So where we are taking notes, let's go to number 2, cartilaginous joints. Cartilaginous joints are called cartilaginous because they have no synovial cavity and the articulating bones are held together by either hyaline cartilage or fibrocartilage. Once again, the cartilaginous joints, if you just stop and think about the phrase, that tells you there's got to be cartilage present in the joint. That cartilage is either going to be hyaline cartilage or fibrocartilage. Okay. So when, excuse me a second. When we talk about the cartilaginous joints, well, there's subtypes of those. Just like there were subtypes of fibrous joints, there are subtypes of cartilaginous joints. So let's talk about the subtypes. We have The subtypes that I'm going to put into your notes at this time are the synchondrosis, okay, so for fibrous joints, the picture in your book you should have been looking at was figure 9.1. For cartilaginous joints, the figure in your book you should be looking at is figure 9.2. Okay. All right, so a synchondrosis you can see in figure 9.2. It's picture A there in the lower left corner of page 263. A synchondrosis is a cartilaginous joint in which the connecting material is hyaline cartilage. So if you see hyaline cartilage, you know you're dealing with a synchondrosis. Cartilaginous joint in which the connecting material is made of hyaline cartilage. So if you see a joint, well, okay.
Dr. Allen,
Yes.
is that the synchondrosis? Is that connected? Is that like the sternum and the rib connect, like in between, like the sternum and the rib connecting to each other?
Yes,
That-
it is.
Together.
So let me give you some examples of this. Okay, and thank you for your question, Kimberly. An example of a synchondrosis would be the epiphyseal or growth plate that you see between the epiphysis and diaphysis of the bone on picture C. Okay, epiphyseal cartilage is in fact a synchondrosis joint, part of a synchondrosis joint. The epiphyseal parentheses growth plate that connects the epiphysis and diaphysis of a growing bone is a synchondrosis. Okay, questions so far? I know this is all very cut and dry stuff, gang. You basically have to sit down during your study time and make sure you understand the organization of these classification terms so that you don't confuse them between categories. That will be the biggest risk you face at this time.
Dr. Allen, can you please explain to me again what and exactly what an epiphysis and a diaphysis exactly is?
Sure. Okay, so the questions about the epiphysis and diaphysis, the easiest way for me to explain that to you is to take you back to chapter 6. Okay, so as you go back to chapter 6, let's go back to page 173, figure 6.1. And you can see it there for yourself. The diaphysis is the central shaft of the bone, if you will. And the epiphysis, where you see the epiphyseal line, is sort of the end region of the bone.
Is the epiphysis always at the end?
That is correct.
And then the diaphysis is kind of more in the middle?
That is correct.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Hang in there, gang. We're almost done with these sort of anal vocabulary details. Okay, so the second kind of cartilaginous joint, the other one that that is not a synchondrosis, is actually the symphysis. So at this time, I'm back on page 263, figure 9.2, picture B for the symphysis. Okay, a symphysis, in a symphysis, you have a flap of fibrocartilage that connects the bone. Okay, the bones are joined by fibrocartilage. Okay, so an example of that would be the pubic symphysis of your pelvic girdle. And if you think back to it, you know, the joints that make up the joints between the vertebrae of your vertebral column, because they are linked by fibrocartilage, each one of those is in fact a symphysis. The joints between the vertebrae. Okay. Gang, so far, do you have any additional questions about fibrous joints or cartilaginous joints? The final third
I have
category.
a question.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Does most of them always have fibrocartilage in them?
Do most of them always have fibrocartilage in them? I couldn't tell you off the top of my head what the number of hyaline cartilage to fibrocartilage joints is. So I think it's closer to 50-50 than you might think. Anything else?
I have a question. On the test, are you going to be showing like certain joints for us to like basically like kind of like pinpoint like what is what basically?
There will be some essay questions on joints, but the essay questions are going to be more focused on your understanding of joint motion than they will on joint structure. Okay, anything else? Okay. Let's go on to the final category of functional classification. Number 3 is the synovial joint. Synovial joints. Okay, synovial joints, well, obviously, they do contain a synovial cavity. Okay, the purpose of the synovial cavity is to provide a pocket of space for the synovial fluid. So the synovial joints contain a synovial cavity, which contains synovial fluid. And the whole point of synovial fluid is to act as a lubricating liquid to reduce friction between the bones that are rubbing up against each other. The purpose of the synovial fluid is to lubricate the joint to reduce friction between the bones. Okay. Now, the synovial fluid okay, I'm going to put a question into the chat window for you. Where does the synovial fluid come from? Where does the synovial fluid come from? Any thoughts? The reason I'm asking you this, okay, Kimberly says proteins. Certainly there are going to be some peptides and amino acids floating in the synovial fluid. So that's not a bad answer, Kimberly. But when we think about the fluid itself, it's primarily made of water. So, you know, what is the okay, thank you very much. There we go. That's what I'm fishing for, okay? What is the ultimate source of any fluid made of water in the body? It is the blood plasma, okay? If we're talking about what is the ultimate source of the cerebrospinal fluid, that's your blood plasma. What's the ultimate source of lymphatic fluid? That's blood plasma. What is the ultimate source of urine? That's blood plasma. What's the ultimate source of synovial fluid? Blood plasma, right? All fluids in the body, and I'll type this into the chat window, all fluids in the body get their volume from the water of the blood plasma. All fluids in the body get their volume from the water of the blood plasma. It's no different for the synovial fluid. So,
Dr. Allen,
okay.
I don't see anything written down, and your mic was cutting in and out.
Okay, in the chat window, do you see a sentence from me that says, oh, okay, thank you very much. I see what happened here. Let me do that again. Thank you for speaking up. I want you to speak up because I don't want you to lose things. Okay, can you see that?
Yes.
Okay, good, good. All right, all fluids in the body get their volume from the water of the blood plasma. So, okay, let me put this down in your notes. The synovial fluid is made of interstitial fluid from the blood plasma and contains hyaluronic acid, which is secreted by cells that resemble fibroblasts. Okay. All right. Okay, folks. In the interest of time, what I'm going to do is type in a few vocab-related terms that I would like you to spend some study time on, making sure that you know a basic definition of. That way I can move on to the next major topic, which, well, I don't think we'll get finished today looking at the clock, but let's see what we can do. Okay, look up the following terms during your study time. Okay, please look up the term meniscus. Okay, please look up the term labrum. Please look up the term bursa. Please look up the term tendon sheath. Okay, there's just a few other features or aspects of joint anatomy that I would like you to appreciate. Okay, I know this is not optimal conditions and I apologize. So before I continue moving into a conversation about the motion of joints, let me pause and ask you again, do you have any questions at this time?
Those vocab words are going to be on the lecture exam, correct?
Yes.
I have one more question. If I took your bio class last semester and I'm already in the where you take the test, do I have to re-sign up for it?
Yes, you do, Kimberly, because what you registered for last semester was for a different course, so you need to make a new account for this course. Anything else? Okay. All right, gang. So what we're going to do now is talk about different types of motion at the synovial joints. And so this moves us on to page 266 and 267 of your textbook. Motion at the synovial joints. All right, we'll take the first one and get it out of the way because it's really not a big deal. First, we have gliding motion. Okay, the gliding motion is illustrated for you in figure 9.4 on page 267. And in this kind of motion, you have a side-to-side or back and forth motion between the bones. Bones move side to side or back and forth. But the key thing here is that when the bones move, there is no significant change in the angle between the bones. There's no significant change in the angle between the bones that are moving. All right. So that's just a small category of motion. The ones that I really want to focus on are the angular motion terms, because there's a whole bunch of those. Okay. Now for angular movements, and we're going to be putting a bunch of these in your notes, if not today, then next time. In the angular motion terms, there is a significant increase or decrease in the angle between the bones that are articulating. So in angular motion, there is a significant increase or decrease in the angle between articulating bones. So there's a whole bunch of these here, and it's unfortunate because, you know, if we were together in class, I would get you out of your seat and I would actually have you do some of these motions. We would do them together as a group. It's kind of a fun activity we can do, but right now we can't see each other, so it doesn't really work all that well. But at least let's get some definitions in your notes. So let's talk about the subtypes of angular motion terms. Okay, so first we have flexion. Okay, flexion is when you have a decrease in the angle between articulating bones. Okay, so flexion is highlighted for you on various pictures of figure 9.5. Figure 9.5, it's highlighted in picture B, it's highlighted in picture C, it's highlighted in picture D, picture E, picture F. Okay, so what I would want you to do as you study these things is make sure you really look at these diagrams, these drawings, and understand what it's trying to show you. Okay, if you have your arms straight out in front of your body and you bend your elbows so that the palms of your hand get closer to your face, that's flexion. There's a decrease in the angle between the bones of the elbow, right? Between the radius and ulna in relation to the humerus of your upper arm. So that would be flexion. Oh, goodness. All right. It's 9:17 by my watch. So, gang, do you have any questions before we close up for today?
Just so I'm not confused, the histology paper, that's for the lab exam itself, correct?
That is correct. The histology packet is for the lab exam, and I will be going over the answers to the histology packet in today and Wednesday's office hour in 15 minutes. Any other questions? Okay, so gang, stay focused here. What we're going to do next lecture on Wednesday is finish these angular motion terms up in your notes. I will field any questions from you that you might have, and then we're going to start chapter 10. Chapter 10 is a little bit more enjoyable to talk about over the computer because I'm going to be talking more about physiology at that time. So hang in there. I know this is cut and dry, but I still need to hold you responsible for some basic joint understanding on your next exam. Okay, if you don't have any questions, stay focused, work hard, and I will be back online with you at the same meeting location, Zoom, here in 15 minutes for anybody that wants help with their lab homework. Okay, I will see you in 15 minutes at about 9:35. Okay, gang, welcome back. If you can hear me okay, would you please type yes into the chat window? Okay, great. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you for sticking around. And what we'll get started with here is going over the answers to your homework and the histology packet. And then I'll open it up if you have questions either about lecture or lab that I can help you with. So on lab exercise 12, let's start with lab exercise 12. Let's go to reviewing your knowledge on page 183. Okay. All right. So reviewing your knowledge, page 183. We're going to go over the answers to that. We'll start with section A, the skeletal muscle structure. Okay, here we go. So you were to order this from largest to smallest, starting with number 1 and increasing the numbers to 5. So here's how you would have done it. Number 1 should be at the term muscle. Number 2 should be at the term fascicle. Number 3 should be at the term muscle fiber. Number 4 should be at the term myofibril. Number 5 should be at the term filaments. Do you need me to repeat that? Okay, continuing on. Section B, the skeletal muscle structural terms. Number 1, perimysium. 2, T-tubule. 3, sarcolemma. 4, epimysium. 5, sarcomere. 6, sarcoplasmic reticulum. 7, endomysium. 8, triad. 9, myofibril. Would you like any of those repeated?
Number 3 and number 6.
Okay. Number 3 is the sarcolemma, and number 6 is the sarcoplasmic reticulum. Okay. Anything else from that group you need repeated? Okay, moving to section C on page 184. All right. Letter C, number 1. 1 is the A as in apple, A band. 2 is also A band. 3 is M as in Mary, the M line. 4 is H as in Howard, H zone and I band. Number 5 is the I band. 6 is the Z as in Zorro, Z disc. 7 is the H zone. 8 is the zone of overlap. 9 is the sarcomere. And 10 is the H as in Howard, H zone. Do you need any of that repeated?
You said that number, what was it? 4 was H zone and I band.
Correct. Anything else? Okay, gang, let's go to letter D, the neuromuscular junction. Number 1, synaptic vesicles. Number 2, the motor end plate. Number 3, the synaptic cleft. Number 4, the axon terminal. Number 5, the synaptic end bulbs. If you need any repeated, please type them into the chat window. Okay, Let's go to page 185, using your knowledge. Page 185, using your knowledge. Number 1. Okay, so the question is meat from an older or younger animal more tender, and explain this? Well, folks, meat from a younger animal is going to be more tender simply because there's less connective tissue. As we get older, as animals get older, the amount of connective tissue actually increases. And so younger animals have more tender tissue because they have less connective tissue around the muscle. Number 2, weight training increases muscle fiber size by increasing the number of myofibrils. Explain. It's important that you appreciate that when you get stronger, your muscles get stronger not because you're making additional cells. You're not making additional cells. You're taking the cells you already have and you're increasing the number of myofibrils inside each muscle cell. The myofibrils are the contractile organelles that your homework was talking about, and which I'll be highlighting and pointing out when we get to chapter 10 in our lecture time together, which should happen starting on Wednesday. Okay, so the amount of force that a muscle can create is determined by the number of myosin heads that connect to actin heads. Hopefully that makes sense to you from your study time. Okay. All right. Number 3, the diaphragm is a muscle that controls inspiration, meaning inhalation. Is control of the diaphragm voluntary, involuntary, or both? Well, the diaphragm is an unusual muscle because you actually have both voluntary and involuntary control over it, right? I mean, you can hold your breath, right? Go ahead and hold your breath for 5 seconds. You can do that, right? But after a while, your brain is going to force you to breathe. So you actually have both voluntary and involuntary control over the diaphragm. So the quick answer to number 3 is both. Do you have any questions about the first 3 questions? Okay. All right, let's go to questions 4, 5, and 6 on page 185. You were to indicate which part of the neuromuscular junction is affected, the motor end plate or the axon terminal. Excuse me. For number 4, the answer is receptors on the motor end plate. For number 5, the answer is receptors on the motor end plate. For number 6, the answer is synaptic vesicles in the axon terminal of the neuron. Okay, so 4 and 5 were motor end plate, and 6 was the axon terminal. Moving to questions 7, 8, 9, and 10. Number 7 is smooth muscle. 8, skeletal muscle. 9, smooth muscle. And 10 is skeletal muscle. Before we turn the page, do you have any questions about anything on page 185? Okay, let's go to the next page. Page 186, 11 through 13, you had some pictures there. You were to rank the pictures from 1 least to 3 greatest according to the number of cross bridges. Number 11 is number 3. That's the greatest number of cross bridges. Number 12 is number 1. That's the least number of cross bridges. And 13 is number 2. It's the middle or partial number of cross bridges. So 11 is 3, 12 is 1, 13 is 2. Do you have any questions? Okay, gang. Gang, let's go to lab exercise 14. Lab exercise 14, I know this was a huge activity, lots of things for you to do, and I appreciate your hard work. As always, it will benefit you to get through this content so that you can understand. because we also have the histology packet to do today, I'm just going to go over reviewing your knowledge starting on page 233 of your lab manual. So page 233, reviewing your knowledge from lab exercise 14. Okay, page 233, letter A, here we go. Number 1 is antagonist. Number 2 is fixator. 3 is synergist. 4 is agonist. Letter B, criteria for naming muscles. Please type into the chat window if you need me to slow down or if you need me to repeat an answer. Letter B, number 1, the term latissimus refers to the relative size of the muscle, and dorsi refers to the location, right on the back. Number 2, rectus refers to the orientation of the muscle fibers relative to the midline of the body, and abdominis refers to the location. Number 3, trapezius refers to the shape of the muscle. Number 4, biceps refers to the number of origins, and brachii refers to the location. Number 5, levator refers to the action of the muscle, and scapulae refers to the location of the muscle. Number 6, the term flexor refers to the action, carpi refers to the location, radialis indicates that this moves to the radial surface, which is abduction, abduction. Number 7 is piriformis, that refers to the shape of the muscle. 8 is gluteus, this refers to the location of the muscle, and medius to the relative size of the muscle. Number 9 is rhomboid. This refers to the shape of the muscle, and major to the relative size of the muscle. 10 is pectoralis. That refers to location, and major refers to the relative size of the muscle. Folks, do you need anything from section B repeated? Okay, let's go to anatomy review on pages 234 and 235. Okay, hang in there. I know there's a lot of this. Letter C, number 1. Number 1 is frontalis. 2, orbicularis oris. 3, omohyoid. 4, sternohyoid. 5, latissimus dorsi. 6, serratus anterior. 7, rectus abdominis. 8, external oblique. 9, extensor carpi radialis longus. 10, tensor fascia lati. In the first 10, do you have anything you need me to repeat? Okay, Allie, number 8. Number 8 is external oblique. Number 9, extensor carpi radialis longus. Okay, moving to number 11. Number 11 is iliacus. 12, psoas major. 13, pectinus. 14, adductor longus. 15, sartorius. 16, adductor magnus. 17, gracilis. 18, vastus lateralis. 19, rectus femoris. 20, vastus medialis. From 11 to 20, do you need anything repeated?
You said number 14 was abductor or adductor?
Right. 14 is ADD, adductor longus.
So 16 was abductor.
16 was also adductor, ADD,
Okay.
adductor magnus. Anything else? Okay, moving to question 21. Question 21 is gastrocnemius. 22, soleus. 23, flexor digitorum longus. 24, temporalis. 25, orbicularis oculi. 26, zygomaticus. 27, platysma. 28, sternocleidomastoid. 29, levator scapulae. 30, trapezius. Do you need anything from 21 to 30 repeated? 26. 26 is zygomaticus. 23 is flexor digitorum longus. 27 is platysma, P-L-A-T-Y-S-M-A, platysma. Okay, 29, levator scapulae. Okay, moving to number 31. 31 is deltoid. 32, pectoralis major. 33, brachialis. 34, biceps brachii. 35, triceps brachii. 36, extensor carpi radialis longus. 37, brachioradialis. 38, flexor digitorum superficialis. 39, palmaris longus. 40, tibialis anterior. From 31 to 40, do you need any repeated? 36, extensor carpi radialis longus. 37, brachioradialis. Okay, moving to number 41. 41 is fibularis longus. 42, occipitalis. 43, sternocleidomastoid. 44, trapezius. 45, deltoid. 46. 46 is triceps brachii. 47, extensor carpi radialis longus. 48, extensor carpi ulnaris. 49, flexor carpi ulnaris. 50, gastrocnemius. Folks, do you need anything between 41 and 50 repeated? 42, occipitalis, occipitalis. Suzette, you wanted 43, that's sternocleidomastoid. Okay, moving to number 51. 51 is soleus. 52 is the calcaneal, also called Achilles tendon. 53, frontalis. 54, temporalis. 55, masseter. 56, platysma. 57, infra, I-N-F-R-A, infraspinatus. 58, teres minor. 59, teres major. 60, latissimus dorsi. Between 51 and 60, do you need any repeated? Okay, 51 is soleus. Soleus. All right, moving to 61. 61 is external oblique. 62, the gluteus medius. 63, the flexor carpi ulnaris. 64, palmaris longus. 65, tensor fascia lati. 66, gluteus maximus. 67, vastus lateralis. 68, gracilis. 69 is adductor, ADD, adductor magnus. 70 is semitendinosus. Let's finish this. 71, biceps femoris. 72, semimembranosus. 73 is fibularis longus, or you could have also said peroneus longus. 74 is soleus. So from 61 to 74, do you need any of that repeated? 65 is tensor fascia lati. 64 is palmaris longus. 72 is semimembranosus. Okay, anything from this section C that you need repeated again? I know that was an awful lot. Okay, let's go to letter D for muscle function on page 236. We'll start with muscles of the head and neck. Okay, number 1, you would put down G, zygomaticus major. 2 is C, orbicularis oris. 3 is B, orbicularis oculi. 4 and 5 are A, masseter, and E, temporalis. 6 is D, as in David, sternocleidomastoid. 7 is F for trapezius. Do you need any of that repeated? Okay. Muscles of the anterior trunk. Number 8 is D for pectoralis major. 9 is A for deltoid. 10 is F for serratus anterior. 11 is E for rectus abdominens. 12 to 13 is B for external oblique and C for internal oblique. 14 is G as in George for transversus abdominis. Do you need any of that repeated, folks? Okay, let's go to page 237, muscles of the posterior trunk. 15 and 16. 15 is C, latissimus dorsi, and 16 is D, teres major. 17 is A for deltoid, and 18E for trapezius. 19 is B for erector spinae, Muscles of the arm and forearm, number 20. 20 is J for triceps brachii. 21 is A for biceps brachii. 22 is B for brachialis. 23 is C for brachioradialis. 24 is G for flexor carpi radialis. 25 is H for flexor carpi ulnaris. 26 is I for palmaris longus. 27 is F for extensor digitorum. 28 is E for extensor carpi ulnaris. 29 is D for extensor carpi radialis. Gang, do you need 20 through 29 repeated? Okay, let's go to muscles of the thigh. Number 30. Number 30 is the rectus femoris. 31 through 33 are K, vastus intermedius, L for vastus lateralis, and M for vastus medialis. 34 is G for sartorius. 35 is E for gracilis. 36 is A for adductor magnus, longus, and brevis. 37 is C as in Charlie for gluteus maximus. 38 J for tensor fasciae lati. 39 D for gluteus maximus. 40 through 42 are B biceps femoris, H semitendinosus, H is semimembranosus, and I is semitendinosus. You need 30 through 42, any part of that repeated. Okay, 30 is F rectus femoris. 35 is E gracilis. 39 is D for gluteus maximus. Okay, let's complete this with muscles of the leg. 43 is B, fibularis longus. 44 is C, flexor digitorum longus. 45 is E, soleus. 46 is D, gastrocnemius. 47 is A, extensor digitorum longus. 48 is F, tibialis anterior. We did it, gang. Do you need any part of this repeated? Okay. All right, gang. So if you work through this, again, thank you so much for your hard work. I know it's difficult when you don't get immediately rewarded, but you know at this point that you are getting credit for the work on the honor system. I'm assuming you're doing this. It benefits you. It's in your best interest to do it. So good job to you for finishing that. Let's take a look at your histology packet. Okay. And so, why don't I bring up the Word document and I'll go page by page and tell you what every answer of it was. Okay, so bear with me a moment. Let's go to the Word document. Okay. And let's bring that. If you can see the Word document, please type in yes to the chat window. Okay, great, thank you. Histology packet answers. Okay, Page 1. Gang, A is transitional epithelium. Transitional epithelium. There's no way you would have known it, but the first page is actually an area of the urinary bladder. So A is transitional epithelium. For the bracket for B, I simply want you to be able to tell me that that is what connective tissue looks like. That's connective tissue. C. I know it's, unless you stare really hard at C, you might wonder what that little pink thing is. Well, gang, that pink thing is a collagen fiber. D. Arrow D is pointing to a fibroblast. E. That structure that you see in box E, that's a blood vessel, gang. That's what a blood vessel looks like. And F, well, F is showing you the transition zone between the epithelium and the underlying connective tissue. So F is the basement membrane. Okay. If you have questions, you need me to slow down, please type into the chat window. Page 2. Page 2. Page 2, letter A is ciliated, pseudostratified, columnar epithelium. What a mouthful. Ciliated, pseudostratified, columnar epithelium. B is connective tissue. C, arrow C is pointing to a fibroblast. D is once again pointing to a collagen fiber. E is pointing to the basement membrane. F is one of my favorites. You've heard me talk about it before. F is a goblet cell. And G is highlighting the cilia. Okay. I'm going to move next to page 3. Page 3, letter A is simple cuboidal. Letter A is a simple cuboidal epithelial cell. Box B is around a group of circular cells that form a ring. This is the excretory duct, because you're looking, excuse me, you're looking at an exocrine gland in this picture. So part B is an excretory duct or excretory tubule. Letter C is the lumen of the excretory duct. D is pointing to the nucleus of the cell. And E is the basement membrane. Okay, page 4. Page 4, letter A is showing you hyaline cartilage. Letter B is sort of a bunch of pinkish purple area. That is showing you the ground substance. B is ground substance. Okay, you know the ground substance is part of the extracellular matrix. B is ground substance. C is the nucleus of the cartilage cell, and you know that a cartilage cell is called a chondrocyte. So this is the nucleus of the chondrocyte. D is the chondrocyte. E is the pocket or the cavity that would hold the cell, so that's the lacuna. So E is the lacuna, which is containing a chondrocyte. The lacuna, which is a pocket that holds the chondrocyte. F is an area of tissue that surrounds the cartilage called the perichondrium. Okay. Remember we talked with the bones that your bones are initially made of cartilage, and the membrane around the cartilage is called the perichondrium. Over time, the cartilage that forms the early bones of your skeleton ossify into bone tissue. The perichondrium differentiates into the periosteum. So right now, letter F is the perichondrium. Okay, page 5. Page 5. Bracket A, well, this is adipose tissue. Letter B is pointing out adipocytes. Okay, so these are the cells of the tissue. C, once again, is a blood vessel, and if you look inside, you can see the little purple things, which are blood cells. But C is a blood vessel. And D is pointing out the nuclei of multiple cells. Okay, you notice in a fat cell, an adipocyte, the nucleus is along the border of the plasma membrane. It's not inside the cell like you typically think of it. It's not in the center like you typically think. Okay. Page number 6. Okay, letter A. What you're seeing on page 6, letter A, is dense irregular connective tissue. Letter B is a transverse section of a collagen fiber. Okay. If you don't know what transverse is, that's the long shaft of the fiber, if you will. C is pointing out fibroblasts, and D is the longitudinal or short section of a collagen fiber. Okay, page 7. Page 7. Letter A is compact bone tissue. That's what you're seeing there. A is compact bone tissue. Box B is around an osteon. bracket C, I'm trying to point out these tiny little fibers that run in between the lamella of the osteon. So C is the canaliculi. D are the circular rings of the osteon, which are called lamella. E is the pocket or depression that holds the bone cell, so that's also called lacuna. And F, I'm trying to highlight the central cavity of the osteon, which is called the central or Haversian canal. And you know that blood vessels and nerve fibers run through the central canal. Okay. Please type in any questions you might have into the chat window. I don't want to go too fast for you. Page 8. Page 8, letter A is skeletal muscle tissue. Letter B is a skeletal muscle cell, sometimes called a skeletal muscle fiber. C is a nucleus of a cell. D and E were pretty hard, and you really had to stare carefully at it and maybe magnify it on your computer screen. But D is an area of the muscle fiber called an A band. A as in apple, an A band. And E is an area of the muscle fiber called an I band. A band for D and I band for E. Hang in there, gang. I know this is a lot of stuff. Page 9. Page 9. Letter A is cardiac muscle tissue. Letter B is the nucleus. Letter C, when you look at letter C, you see a bracket. And if you scan your eyes to the left, you see a nucleus. And if you scan your eyes further to the left, you see an area where the cell starts to separate into two branches. You see two pink areas with a little bit of white space in between. So letter C is a branching cardiac muscle cell. Okay, muscle cell is also called a muscle fiber. Letter D are intercalated discs. Intercalated discs, and you may remember from our conversation in chapter 4 that intercalated discs contain two kinds of cell junctions. Can anybody remember what the cell junctions are that are part of intercalated discs? If you remember, go ahead and type it into the chat window. What cell junctions are found in intercalated discs? Well, gap junction, yes, very good. Gap junction and desmosomes. Very good. Gap junction and desmosomes. Okay. Moving to page 10. Page 10, letter A, you're looking at a picture of smooth muscle tissue. You're looking for letter B, you're looking at a nucleus. For letter C, you're looking at an individual smooth muscle cell or smooth muscle fiber. Okay, page 11. For page 11, letter A, this is a picture of areolar connective tissue. Letter B is a mast cell. Letter C is pointing to the nucleus of the mast cell. Letter D, the box is around a fibroblast. So you can see that fibroblast cells have shown up in quite a lot of the pictures that I've given you in this packet.
Dr. Allen, I have a question.
Yes.
If our bodies didn't have the fibroblast, what would happen?
Well, remember the fibroblasts are the collagen factories. So a lot of the stretchiness and flexibility of your tissues, you think about your skin tissue on your arm, how you can squeeze it and it flexes and twists and bends, that would be missing. Okay, so a lot of the tissue, you would actually have structural damage without the collagen. Anything else? Okay, page 12. Page 12, letter A is reticular connective tissue. This is what reticular connective tissue looks like. Letter B, the box is around a reticular cell. And letter C, well, those wispy purple strands, those are reticular fibers. Okay, page 13. Page 13, letter A, well, the whole thing that you're looking at is a picture of elastic connective tissue. Hopefully when you look at it, it gives you the impression that this tissue really wants to compress and stretch. So it's elastic. Letter B, I'm trying to highlight the individual bands or rows of tissue. These are the elastic lamellae. Page 14. Page 14. Well, for page 14, you're looking at nervous system tissue. For letter A, box B is around a neuron. Box C is around the nucleus of the neuron. Arrow D is to an area inside the nucleus. If you got letter D, please type in the answer into the chat box. Okay, I guess that was a bit of a struggle for you. Letter C is the nucleus. Letter D is the nucleolus. The nucleolus within the nucleus. And letter E, if you know anything about the nervous system, not only do we have neurons, there are also cells called glial cells. So letter E is neuroglial cells. Okay. Hang in there, gang. Page 15. Okay, for page 15, what you're looking at here is a visual comparison of an artery versus a vein. Box A is around an artery. Box B is around a vein. Now, box C, bracket C, you can see where bracket C is on the page. Bracket C is along an area of the blood vessel called the tunica media. Tunica media of the artery. And bracket D is the tunica interna of the artery. The tunica interna of the artery. Then E and F are the comparable structures in the vein. Letter E is the tunica media of the vein. Tunica media of the vein. F is the tunica interna of the vein. Okay. Truth be told, I kept this in here because in AMP1, we used to cover the cardiovascular system after the muscles, but as I've mentioned a few times with your group, you will be covering the cardiovascular system in AMP2. The next thing we're doing after the muscles is the nervous system in AMP1 with your group. Okay, page 16. Okay, page 16, letter A, obviously you're looking at blood. B is a red blood cell, which is more appropriately called a erythrocyte. C is a neutrophil, which is a type of white blood cell. Okay, it's a white blood cell, specifically a neutrophil. Neutrophils are very good at attacking bacteria that invade your body. Letter D is also a white blood cell. It's specifically a lymphocyte. Okay, there's different categories of lymphocytes in the body. Some of them make antibodies. You can expect that people that are fighting coronavirus infection right now have an elevated number of lymphocytes. And E, when you look at E, you can see I'm pointing out tiny, tiny little dots. Gang, these tiny little dots are your blood platelets. Okay. And then we're going to finish up with page 17. Letter A, you're looking at lung tissue. Letter B, you're looking at an alveolus within the lungs. Gang, the alveolus is a microscopic chamber for gas exchange in the body. Oxygen that enters your lungs will cross the respiratory membrane in the alveolus and get into your bloodstream. Carbon dioxide waste that's in the bloodstream will cross the respiratory membrane in the opposite direction, enter the alveolus, where then you exhale it out of the body. And then letter C is an alveolar sac. It's basically a group or cluster of individual alveoli grouped together. Okay. All right, gang, do you need any of that repeated? Hopefully having it written down on the Word document and recorded will allow you to review anything you may be missing. Okay. So what I will do now is I'll give another moment or two to finish your note taking for page 17. Then I will stop sharing that screen and we'll get ready to take a small practice quiz on the muscle anatomy. Okay. Okay, so for a moment, gang, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can bring up some practice images for you. So bear with me a moment. Okay, bear with me a moment. And let me find the things that I need to find for you. Okay, let's see here. Just bear with me a moment, gang. I want to select some things to highlight. Let's see. Okay. All right. Okay, gang. So let's do a very quick 3-image quiz so you get a feeling for what some of the pictures will look like on your exam next week. You remember that your exam next week will be taken on the Class Marker website. So if you haven't already registered and created that free account, I want to encourage you to please do that soon so that if there's a technical problem, I can help you with that. Okay. So gang, at this time, I'm going to start sharing my screen with you. And in just a moment, I will flash up a picture, a muscle picture, and I will give you 40 seconds to answer it on your scrap paper, okay? So here we go. Bear with me a sec. Okay, so you should be seeing my Microsoft Word document again. And now you should be seeing a directory on my computer where I have a bunch of images stored. And so let's take the first one here. I'm going to give you 3 practice images. And let's see. For the first one, please name this muscle. Can you tell me what muscle this is? I will give you 40 seconds. Go ahead. Name this muscle. Okay, gang, that's 40 seconds. So I'm going to remove that image and put up a different image. For your second practice question, please name the following muscle. What is this muscle? And that is 40 seconds. Let me give you one more practice image. Okay. Let's try this one. Please name this muscle. Can you name this muscle? 40 seconds. Go ahead. And that is 40 seconds. Okay, gang. Let me bring up the first picture again here. Okay, that's the first picture. And hold on a second here. Wish I had a larger computer screen. Okay, this was your first practice question. If you know what this muscle is, please type it into the chat window. Okay. Ashley says gracilis. Alexia says sartorius. So clearly there's some difference of opinion. Okay. All right. Suzette says adductor magnus. All right. So gang, the correct answer for this practice is gracilis. This is the gracilis muscle. Okay. Let me bring up your next practice. Okay, this was the next one. Please type your answer into the chat window if you had thought about what this is. Okay, Suzette has a thought. Extensor carpi ulnaris. Anybody else? Palmaris longus is Alexia's answer. Okay, gang, believe it or not, this muscle is the flexor digitorum superficialis. The flexor digitorum, if I can spell here correctly. Flexor digitorum superficialis is the second one. Okay. What you want to pay particular attention to on this is note the pattern of the tendons here coming into the palm of the hand. That's very telling that this is the flexor digitorum superficialis. So if you're a little unsure again of a muscle, remember to try to pay some attention to those tendons. All right, your third practice image. Your third practice image was this one. Okay, go ahead, type in your answers into the chat window. Okay, extensor digitorum longus is one guess. Anybody else? Soleus is Renee's guess. All right. Well, gang, believe it or not, this is the fibularis tertius. The fibularis tertius. Okay. So, gang, you know, it's particularly difficult. I understand at this time we've all got so much distraction and other things in our lives. All I can say is do your best with trying to learn these muscles. You will have, I believe I've set the computer next Monday for your lab exam. You will have from 7 a.m. to midnight to take the exam next Monday. And you can take it at a time of your choosing on that day. And in fact, you will have 40 minutes to answer all the questions, which is a little bit more time than I typically give you in the class setting of the lab itself. So you'll have just a little bit more time than you do normally in class to take this exam. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and open up the video channel to you. What questions do you have? What concerns do you have? What do we need to talk about right now?
The artery that you gave us for the histology packet, will that be on the test?
Okay, so let me just say a few things. I've already said to you that between the histology and the muscle identification for the exam, the muscle identification is by far a more important skill for you. So you should put most of your energy into learning the muscles. That being said, when it comes to histology, I'm not going to beat you up too much. I know that's difficult for a student to understand, but I'm going to be looking for the major tissue types. I'm not going to be looking for obscure features of the tissue. So might I have a blood vessel on the exam? Yes, I might, because, you know, a blood vessel is a pretty distinguishing feature of tissue. You should be able to identify blood vessels on the tissue. So yes, Suzette, I will. Folks, how about the rest of you? Anything that you have a question about or need some help with? in this time of distraction, I would encourage you to try to get a little bit of practice each day on your muscles up until this coming Monday. Try to give yourself a half an hour each day and really focus on trying to learn those muscles. Take a group of them at a time and make sure you look at them from different angles and viewing perspectives, and really focus on that. Okay. Gang, is there anything else we should chat about before we sign off for the day? Okay. I'm not hearing anything, so please expect to see an email from me by the end of the day with the lecture recording, and also perhaps a reminder or two about things you should be keeping in your mind. Until that time, I'll see you on Wednesday. Stay safe and take care of yourself and your families, okay? Bye for now.